Great.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the 498 Show. I'm Tony Palmieri from the Communication Studies program at the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. I'm really thrilled today to be joined by someone who I've admired for a long time. He was a student at UW Oshkosh, majoring in radio, TV, film. He took at least one of my classes, maybe more, in the Com Studies program. And his name is Chris Micklos. Chris, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Tony, I'm thrilled to be here. It's great. It's great to talk to you. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it is great to see you. And you graduated in 1992.
I did.
So we're going back here, and I've followed you since you graduated. You've done so many great things. We're going to get more into your biography a little bit later on, but I want to start off with the fact that you are on the verge of releasing your first novel, and it's called Tick Town. It's in the pulp horror genre that we'll talk about. And you're also a very successful filmmaker. You've produced and co-directed two films, The Headmistress and The Nursery. You've won awards for those. Let me read the plot of Tick Town, and then you can tell us how you got into this. All right. So when a northern Wisconsin tourist town becomes the feeding ground for a band of giant mutant ticks, a young reporter, her cop ex-boyfriend, and a veteran newspaperman must track down and destroy the queen tick and her nest before the monsters overrun and slaughter the entire town. So this is the pulp horror genre. How did you come up with this idea, and what is it about this genre that you like?
Well, obviously, when you read the plot, it's obviously a thinly veiled Jane Austen ripoff, as you can tell, clearly. I mean, I've always been into horror. I've loved horror all my life, especially like kind of classic horror from the 30s and 40s. It's always been a thing for me. I used to watch these old movies with my grandmother on the weekends, and so you get that, kind of nostalgic feel. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I read a book called Paperbacks from Hell, which was it was written by Grady Hendrix and Will Erickson, and is like a survey of the 70s and 80s kind of pulp horror paperback era,
Sure.
and lots and lots and lots of books that I had never, heard of, been exposed to in any way. And it's just kind of, we would go through the plots of these books and kind of talk about how crazy they were. And I found it fascinating. I thought it was the most fun thing. I've read the book, I listened to the book a couple times. And then I started about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, reading some of these books, and I just absolutely loved them. They were just the most gonzo, crazy, fun-filled, pulpy horror that you could find. And so, as you mentioned, I've made a couple of films, and
Yeah.
our last one came out in 2023. And when that was on the verge of coming out, that one had taken a while. It had probably been about a 2.5, 3 year process to make and get that movie out. And so I wanted to do something that, was a little simpler. With a movie, you got to raise money, you've got to put a crew together. And then when you're
Yeah.
doing it on micro budget, and you don't, you end up taking a long time to put it together. Our edit time was probably like a year and a half. And so I wanted to do something simpler that I could just kind of sit down at my desk myself and do. And so I really wanted to kind of try and write a novel, see if I could do it. And when I started reading these books, it was like clear, like this was the playground that I wanted to play on.
Nice.
And one of the seminal books that I read, at least for me, was a book called Night of the Crabs, which is it's I think 79, 80, something like that, written by a Welsh writer named Guyan Smith. And it's about, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's about giant crabs run amok in the Welsh countryside. And it was just so much fun and so silly and stupid, but just like wildly entertaining. And so I wanted to do something like that. I love the old 50s and 60s sci-fi kind of big bug horror movies. And so
Oh
I kind of
yeah.
decided I wanted to do something that mixed those sci-fi movies I loved when I was young with this kind of paperback stuff. Um, and that's why I came to giant mutant ticks. Crabs had been done, spiders had been done to death, ants had been done to death, but ticks had not been done. And I
Yeah,
figured in
someone has to fill that.
Wisconsin,
Yeah, someone has to fill that tick niche,
that's right.
or
You
niche.
you got to give the
Um,
people what they want, and they were
yes,
begging for it.
exactly.
So yeah.
Now, you've been working on this novel since 2023, is that right?
Well, so I wrote it in two. I wrote basically wrote it in 2023.
Okay.
Probably February-ish. I started. I'd been writing a screenplay, a spec screenplay, another Jane Austen ripoff called Jingle Bell Chop, and it was a horror comedy, and I got about halfway through it, and I just stopped, and I couldn't go any further for whatever reason. I just got very blocked, and so I thought, well, this would be a time to kind of pick up this idea of the novel that I'd been thinking of. So I started in about February. I actually finished it, relatively quickly for a first novel, in December. Ran through a few drafts, and then in February of 2024, I started looking for an agent and remarkably found an agent relatively quickly.
Wow.
And I think we'd sold the book by, I think we sold it by, maybe July of last year, but it's been, almost a year since we made the deal with the publisher till the book comes out. So the
Wow.
longest part of the process has been just kind of waiting for it to come out.
Right. Now, your home base is Madison, Wisconsin, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I want to tell people that there will be a book launch
Yeah.
in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, which is right outside of Madison, at the Marcus Palace Cinema, and that's on June 28th, right?
Yeah.
My understanding is on June 28th at the Marcus Palace Cinema in Sun Prairie at 4:30 there will first be a screening of a movie.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And what movie is that?
So one of the movies that was very influential on Ticktown was the 1954 giant ant sci-fi classic Them, exclamation mark, Them, exclamation mark. Um, and it's about giant ants in the desert of the Southwest. And it's a great old movie. Um, we're going to screen that at 4:30 at the Palace. It's The film will be introduced by kind of our top local culture critic. His name is Rob Thomas. He works now
Nice.
for CityCast Madison. Going to screen the movie on the ultra screen. I was just in today. It looks fantastic on the big screen, and then afterwards there'll be like a book signing and reception. They have a nice lounge, like bar lounge area, and we'll do a book signing reception. But what's kind of unique about the screening, which I'm really excited about, is the idea is that if you bring a paperback copy of Ticktown with you to the screening or buy one there, we'll have them for sale there.
Mhm.
That's your ticket to the movie. So there's no admission price to the movie. You just got to show up with a book, or get one there, and then that's how you get in. Two
Great.
seats per book. So.
Great. So Ticktown is already available?
It will be on June 24th.
All right.
June 24th, Tuesday, it comes out. It'll be in some local bookstores, which I'm very excited about here in Madison. There's several local bookstores around the state, and actually from San Francisco to Brooklyn, we've been getting placement in lots of cool bookstores.
Nice.
Yeah, and but they can get some. There's some locally here. You'll be able to get it on Amazon, in paperback, and get it by then. Or like I said, we'll have last ditch. We'll have copies available at the screening.
Excellent, excellent. Now, my recollection of you, Chris, from the early 90s, and I've followed this as you've gone on, you're a very thoughtful guy, especially about, social issues and things of that nature. Is there any metaphor in Ticktown? I mean, are the ticks representative of some hostile forces in our society, or is this just, did you write this as pure entertainment with no bigger social significance?
It's a great question. I would love to say that there's some great thoughtful thing behind this. In fact, several weeks ago, we were having dinner with some friends that we hadn't seen in a while, and the person was asking me, this is the exact same question. Is it? It sounds like this is like a global warming thing, and
Yeah.
and I said, God, I would love to say it is, but it is just about giant ticks sucking the blood out of people and eating them and cutting them in half, and it's
So the
it's
queen tick,
pure.
yeah.
It's pure escapist entertainment.
Okay.
It's just
All right.
wild fun.
The
Yeah.
queen tick is not like Christine Nome or something like that.
No, it is not Christy Nome. I
The
there
ticks
is a book
invading
to
the
be
town.
written
The
about
ticks.
that.
It's not like the ticks are not ice invading town.
I would love to say that she makes an appearance and and odd things happen, but no, it is not. I mean, it is as you alluded to, I've worked in politics and political advocacy for most of my life before I kind of moved into
Yes, we'll get to
filmmaking and
that. Yeah,
yeah.
and actually, just occurred to me if Christy Nome was the queen tick, then you would have the ticks attacking puppies, right? But anyway, once again, the book launch of Tick Town, I can't wait to read it, is at the Marcus Palace Cinema in the great Sun Prairie, Wisconsin on June 28th. And Chris, let's go back to your feature films for a second, The Headmistress
Sure.
and the Nursery. These are readily available in streaming, right? Where can people stream your films?
Yeah, you can buy or rent them pretty much anywhere you buy or rent streaming entertainment. So, iTunes or Amazon or anything like that. They're both available on DVD with lots of extras. You can get them on Amazon or whatever. But you can also get them streaming free on a lot of these like ad-based sites. So if someone asks me where to watch the movies, I usually send them to Tubi,
Yeah,
which is a great archive of old movies and new movies and TV shows. But you can watch it free there. Tubi is actually it's a very filmmaker friendly site. So,
yeah,
um, they, without getting into the weeds of like, how distribution of pay works. They're a great
yeah,
site for filmmakers, even though they're a free subscription based or not subscription based site, but ad based site. And it's easy to watch. It's easy to find and get. So go to Tubi and get it rather than forking over the $10
yeah.
to rent it on
I
Amazon.
I love the Tubi site. I grew up in the 1970s, and I
Yeah,
Tubi allows me to go back to some of these god-awful films
yeah.
from the 70s, especially by the way in the horror genre. There were
Yes,
some really
absolutely.
atrocious ones back then.
And TV
Now,
shows. They're great for
yeah,
TV shows too. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And so Tubi's been really great for me for like a nostalgia kind of thing, and I'm really thrilled that your films are on there. So now let's talk a little bit about Chris Micklos and what got you up to the point of being a filmmaker and now a novelist. And so where are you from originally?
So I grew up in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, which is just about 20 miles, 50 miles south of Oshkosh. So I grew up in the Fox Valley. Um, Ended up, lived there, until it was time for college, and then moved to Oshkosh. Oshkosh had I was a radio, TV, film student.
Right.
That was my focus, film focus, and to go for production in the state. Um, and I had a great 4 years there.
Yeah, you did. And you, like I said, you graduated in 1992. I know you took, a couple of my classes that dealt with political rhetoric, and you did go on for a master's degree in political communication at Emerson College in Boston. What was that experience like?
Well, let me let me say I had always intended to pursue out of college, and I was ready to go to grad school to pursue either production or like a more academic thing. But then I ran into this.
Whoop.
Don't mind.
All right, we had a little technical glitch. The ticks got into our recording and took away Chris's background. See what
Oh my
happens when we pick
goodness.
on those ticks?
I
So
know, no kidding.
where we left off, Chris, was in you after you graduated from UW Oshkosh, you went to Emerson College in Boston for a master's degree in political communication.
Yeah.
And I think when we got cut off here, you were saying that you originally planned to get into filmmaking. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's very noteworthy that I should at least point out that I was fully intending to go on to film school and continue my education in that field, but I took a couple classes with a passionate young New York professor who introduced me to Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn and the power of political communication. And this is honest to God truth. I'm sure I must have told you this before, but you completely changed my life and what I wanted to do because all of a sudden the film stuff and the, creative writing just seems so silly, to be honest with you. And so I got entirely passionate about political communication. I wasn't sure what to do with that immediately, so I took about 2 years off. I worked in Madison for a couple years and, marketing basically, and then found Emerson, which at the time was one of the only schools in the country that had a formal political education or political communication master's degree, and I
Mhm.
went off to Emerson to pursue that. But it's all because of you, and it took me like 25 years to get back.
So my apologies for sending you on a 25-year detour.
Yes.
But in that time though, so you and by the way, Chris, I'm really honored to hear that. You know, as teachers, we never know what people are listening to. I always knew that you were really getting into what you were learning, and I was so thrilled when you got back from Boston and you were employed in Madison as the communication director for the majority leader of the Wisconsin State Senate.
Yeah.
And you were a very young guy at that time. How did you get that position in the 1990s?
Well, I will. I'm going to just take a quick detour and say it's funny you say about how you say you never know if you're getting through to people because
Right.
I have this distinct memory of like turning in a paper to you about Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent,
Yeah.
and you were reading the paper and you kind of looked at me and you said, "Wow, you've really internalized this stuff." So you totally got into my head. But I finished my master's program was a 3 semester program, and I did 2 semesters at Emerson, and then I had the opportunity to go run a mayor's race in Brockton, Massachusetts,
Oh,
which
that's
is a little bit
right.
south.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and so my program, which loved that kind of hands-on stuff, said basically don't come to class for your final semester. You can use that as like a work study thing. And I went and ran this mayor's race. We were running against a multi-term incumbent and remarkably won the race,
Amazing.
beat the incumbent. Yeah, it was a thrilling thing. I mean, it was my first ever real involvement in politics. Beat the incumbent. I went to work for the mayor for about a year as his communications director, and then we mentioned his name off air, but my then later longtime business partner Jay Sapiro, who's also was in the RTF program at Oshkosh, he was doing some political communication work. In Madison and had somewhat of a relationship with the Senate Majority Leader, and when he
Hmm.
started looking for a new communications director, Jay kind of made the connection, and I flew in and interviewed with him and really didn't think anything of it, but got the job. And I think I think they. I'd love to say it's because I was so talented or I was so this or that, but I think I was a young guy. I'd had a little bit of success. I was I was single, so you can like put in 18-hour days and all that kind of stuff. I was just kind of I was the perfect guy to grab to be the spokesman for the Senate Majority Leader.
Well,
Yeah.
I tell you, at the time, I was just so thrilled, and your name was in the paper so frequently. And I would always tell students that I would have here that, hey, that's one of our students. That's Chris Micklos. That's one of ours. It was really great. But you were in that position at a time that was really contentious. I mean, Wisconsin politics has been contentious for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
But did that job, being the spokesperson for the majority leader, was it eye-opening for you? I mean, was that the job that got you to see what the system is really like? I mean, probably more than working for a mayor in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because that's the first thing I thought of was like, well, compared to where I was, I
Yeah,
mean, everyone was Democrats where I was. So there was just, it was just basically, whether or not it was all relationships in Massachusetts. Whereas, here there was definitely a partisan divide. I don't think it's near what it is now. In
right.
fact, I was just having a conversation with someone recently, And I was saying back when I was there, which was again now 25 years ago, um, we were encouraged not to fraternize with like Republican staffers, but it was okay. I had a brother-in-law who worked for an assembly, a representative. He was on the Republican side, and he'd come down and hang in our office, and I'd go hang in their office, and it was okay.
Yeah.
Some of the electeds would lunch together across the aisle. My guess is you don't see any of that now. I mean, well, you
No.
probably know. I mean, you would know. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I am married to a Democrat in the state assembly, and she's told me exactly what you're talking about. That the system is set up now to kind of keep the parties at odds with each other, which is really kind of unfortunate, right? Because it's in building those personal relationships that you can get some bipartisan agreement
Oh,
on
yeah.
on some issues, right? And so for the powers that be to take that away, that's just really sad. So you were in that position, I believe, for about 2 years,
About
and
three,
then
actually, almost 3 years. Yeah.
almost 3 years, right? And you
Yeah.
mentioned Jay Sapiro, another really,
Yep.
really great guy, who I remember from
Eh,
his time
eh,
here. Yeah.
Let's not go too far.
But you and Jay, were you the founders of Visuality Media, or was that already in existence?
He and our who eventually was our third partner, or my third partner, Jay and Glenn Chung had founded Visuality about a year before I came aboard.
Okay.
Jay had been running a political communications firm, media firm that was owned by Ed Garvey, and left shortly before Garvey's gubernatorial run.
Hmm.
And he and Glenn, who had been working together a little bit prior to that, founded Visuality. They were doing, I think they did some legislative work for legislative campaigns, things like that. But they had approached me because they were going to be making a big push for a contract with WEAC, the state teachers union, which was like at the time a big, powerful union in the state.
Oh yeah.
Um, and they asked me if I wanted to collaborate on the pitch to them, and so I did. Just kind of wanting to help out, um, but with a kind of an understanding that, well, if they get the work, I'm going to have to go work for them, and that would be a serious conflict. And so they got the business. They asked me to come join them as a partner, and I did, and we were off and running, and it was a great. It was a I was burning out. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know I was burning out on the Senate at the time. But when I left, like literally, I didn't miss it for a day. I mean, I
I'll
loved
bet.
what I was doing, but when I left, I didn't realize, what just a weight was off my shoulders. And coincidentally, when I left, it was the time when there was indictments coming down for the
Right.
legislative leaders, and I was
Right.
out kind of just under that.
Right, exactly right. And so you ended up spending, I believe, 23 years at Visuality Media.
Yeah.
Were you making videos? Was that for various nonprofit and other types of organizations? What specifically was your role at Visuality?
Well, because of our work with WEAC, we ended up getting very involved in the national education environment, and so we worked
Hmm.
with the WEACs, the state teachers unions, in probably 20 states over the course of my time there. And what we were doing for them generally was uh, education advocacy, brand building to kind of like
Yeah,
improve the perception of teachers in their states. But then we were also very much a political media firm. So we were doing ads and strategy for political candidates. We did a lot of work with like here in Wisconsin, for example, we never worked directly for a gubernatorial candidate, but we worked very closely with a lot of the groups that were supporting the gubernatorial candidates throughout our
right.
time. Um, Same thing with congressional folks, and so we did a lot of politics, a lot of advocacy. We worked a lot in Indian country, working with native tribes, which was a fascinating
Hmm.
thing to do. But it was by the time we were done, it was mostly politics.
When you
And
worked,
yeah,
yeah, when you worked with political candidates,
yeah.
were you and Jay and Glenn, were you the guys that like literally wrote the script, or do the candidates come to you and say, this is what we want you to do? Like, how does that work?
So when you're doing a political ad, sometimes they'll have like very specific ideas of what they want to do, but sometimes, We definitely always wrote the scripts and kind of put together the
Okay.
creatives, but a lot, I mean, to be frank, a lot of it was poll driven. So it wasn't like we were coming up and saying, hey, we have just a kind of a random idea. There was usually like, well, we need to be talking about these three issue areas, and we may have even tested language that you need to get into the script. Um,
Wow.
our best ads, our most fun, and I think our most successful ads were often not poll driven. They just, came from an idea. I'll mention we did we did an ad with for Peg Lautenschlager when she was running for Attorney General the first time, and we didn't have any polling, but she had put away a kidnapper who had kidnapped this young woman,
Mhm.
and so and the young woman was now in her 20s and she wanted to do an ad, and so we just kind of said, well, let's come in and we'll do something with you, and we shot, we talked to her and shot it, and it was one of our best ads, and we didn't test anything, we didn't, but it was all, I mean, but it had an impact, and so sometimes you just get lucky, and the more creative stuff,
Yeah.
we didn't test any of that.
Yeah. By the way, I remember Peg, and she is much, much missed. All
She
right.
is.
Yeah, she is. She was really a great one. So you graduate from UW Oshkosh, and thanks to this troublemaking professor from Brooklyn, you go on a
Yes.
25-year detour, and
Yep.
then you get back into what you maybe wanted to do at the
Yeah.
age of 21. So what got you back into filmmaking?
So Jay and Glenn and I, we just to be clear, we did all the strategy and stuff like that. We also had a full service media firm, and so we were making media all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and the three of us were we were all all great movie fans. And Jay and I having the film education background, and just Glenn being interested in it, we always talked about, oh, we should try and make a movie. And we had some stops and starts over the years. But then in 2016, our business was changing a little bit. And I think, so in 2016, I was 46. Is that right? Yeah. And at some point you start thinking, well, if I'm not going to do it now, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to, when I'm 80, I'm not going to make my first movie. So we just decided, let's see how far we can get. So the three of us started thinking about a concept. We came up with a concept. We collaborated on a script, and I ended up writing a script. And we're like, oh, we got a script. And then we thought, I wonder if we can get local actors. It was a college age script. Wonder if we can find local actors. So we did casting, and we found a cast. And eventually it was like, well, geez, I guess we got to make this movie. We've got all the elements. We've talked to people. And so we shot The Nursery, which was our first movie, which was a ghost story, a very micro budget ghost story.
Yeah.
We shot it over the course of about 6 weeks. In late 2016, we started at the end of September, went through early November, and we did it on the weekends. We'd shoot it. We'd start Thursday night, and we'd shoot overnight. For 3 nights in a row, then we'd take a break, come back the next weekend, and it was great. We had a great time. Um, we when we were done, we went back and we looked at the footage and we thought, oh, holy crap, this is awful. This is just, I mean, I've never seen such bad, shooting. Um, but we had enough background to know there's stuff in there that you can use. But
Hmm.
it was funny how overwhelming it was. It was like we have 12 takes of this scene and only one works at all. But you go through and you
Wow.
find it and you piece it together and you cover your mistakes. And when it was done, we actually had a movie we were really proud of. And we thought, well, let's try and see if we can find a distributor. And we got lots and lots of offers on it. And we found a really good distributor, a small distributor, but a quality distributor. And they got us, everywhere you want to go when you have a movie like that. And so,
Wow.
I mean, it was just a great experience. It was just a
So
wonderful
what is the
experience.
so for people that are not filmmakers,
Yeah.
what is the budget for a film like that? How much did it cost you guys to make that film?
So the nursery we shot. This is going to be a rough figure, but it was somewhere in the like 25 to $30,000 range.
Okay.
And basically, that money was we paid the crew. We got a professional crew in. People who shot. Lit. It was a small
Hmm.
crew. There was only like maybe five or six of us, but we paid the crew. Um, spent a lot of money on, food and pizza and stuff like that for because we keep everyone well fed on the set and that sort of thing. And then you have to pay, for people to put the audio together later, and you have to pay for music and all that kind of stuff.
Oh
So in the
yeah.
end, it was like, and then, you don't even think about like legal fees. I mean, probably a quarter of that budget was legal fees, just to get the movie ready to be professionally distributed. So anyway, so yeah, that was about what it was. Our second movie, The Headmistress, was a little bit more, but not much more. We were about in the $45,000 range.
Hmm.
So they're definitely micro budget movies. I always, I always laugh. I used to do a podcast where we'd interview indie filmmakers, and
Right.
people would come on and say, "Oh, we had no money to work with. It was like such a struggle. We only had like 500 grand to work with." And it was like, "Oh my God, I would kill for a $500,000 budget." You know.
How did you guys raise the money for your films? Did you do like GoFundMe or private fundraisers? What did you do?
So for the first movie for the nursery, my partners and I contributed about half
Okay.
ourselves, and then we did crowdfunding for about the other half. So we had a lot of generous, mostly, honestly, mostly friends and family who contributed, and you know, it was great. And then the second movie, we had some investors who really they were local people who invested in businesses and stuff. And Jay had a relationship with one of them and kind of introduced us. And they really wanted to make a movie with us. So we wrote a script for a kind of a horror comedy. One of them was involved in Carbon 4 Brewing here
Right.
in Madison. And so we wrote a script that takes place at a brewery, and we are going to go shoot at their place. But then one of the other investors came to us like just when we were getting ready to like start casting and said, "Hey, I just bought this property in Oconomowoc. I wanted the land to build on the land, but it currently has an abandoned nunnery on it. Would you guys like to
Oh
come look
God.
at it?" And so we were like, "Oh yeah, let's go look at this." And so this was probably in February, whatever it was, 2019. And we went and looked at it. It was amazing. I mean, it wasn't haunted, but it should have been haunted. It was a beautiful, like old structure. And he said, "Look, I'm going to burn this to the ground in November, but you can do anything you want to it until then." And
Wow.
so we wrote a new concept. We cast it. Instead of going just locally, we had actors from Chicago. We had someone from LA. We had someone from Portland. We were getting actors from all over the country. Um, Came in. We all lived on the property for about 13 days and shot and lived and kind of was like it was a great kind of
What a
like
great
summer camp
experience.
atmosphere. It was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that's the Headmistress and the Nursery, both of them
Yeah.
on Tubi. You can actually watch them on your phone. That's one thing I like about Tubi. It's really easy to get the films on your phone. Chris, when you think back on your time at UW Oshkosh, how would you assess the quality of the education you got at UW Oshkosh? Was this in your judgment, and especially when you look back on it now, a high quality place?
Uh, Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a great experience at UW Oshkosh. We've been talking about filmmaking, and I said I was a radio TV film major, but that program was wonderful. The fact that I didn't pursue it immediately was not an indictment of the program. Doug
Right.
Heil, who ran the program at the time, the film side of it, Doc Snyder was still Bob Snyder, Doc Snyder was still, the chair of the department. I mean, they put together a great program. It was a great hands-on program. They were just very nurturing and encouraging. And I had a wonderful experience, but also had all kinds of opportunity to take classes that might not have otherwise, like your classes.
Yeah.
I took a lot of English classes because I love to write and I was very interested in literature. I had a professor named Paul Klemp in the English department
Oh
who
my
was
God, great guy.
yeah, wonderful
Yeah.
professor. And again, very like, kind of a no BS kind of guy. And he was just so nurturing like you were. I can remember going to conferences with you.
Yeah, I
I
was thinking about that the other day. You and I went to a conference. It may have been the Wisconsin Communication Association.
it was.
And wasn't it around the time of the Rodney King verdict?
Yes.
As because I recall you and me talking about the Rodney King verdict,
Yeah.
and it, it was
Yeah.
it was around that time. So, you know, and Chris, what's so sad, what has happened in the UW, and don't get me wrong, it's still a tremendous system. It's one of the greatest in the world, actually. But now it's so much more difficult to do things like that with the budgets that have been cut
Oh,
now,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It just everything has just been cut back and so on. But I always remind people that, hey, look, we've had people graduate from this place over many, many decades who, like yourself, have gone on to do just some incredible work. And so what's so now you've done films, you got your first novel coming out. What do you see happening in the next few years? More films, more novels?
Yeah, Jay and Glenn and I, I should have been more clear, the three of us collaborated on the films. We were in business
Right.
together, then we collaborated on the films. Jay and I directed them, but Glenn was a producer and he was extremely involved. We talk frequently. I'm not part of Visual Ed anymore, but we talk frequently about maybe what the next project might be. We all want to make another movie, but it is challenging with the time it takes and stuff.
Right.
I've finished my second novel. I'm about three drafts in, and I'm coming close to kind of wrapping that up. So I wanna
Wow.
get that out next. Right now, I'm in a very busy period trying to bring attention to Ticktown. With a
Yeah.
small publisher, you do it all yourself. So I've been cultivating my lists, and I've reached out to literally hundreds of bookstores across the country trying to get placement. And I'm lucky because I have a very supportive spouse who, I can spend most of, not all day, but I can spend most of my days doing this stuff. She's got other stuff she wants me to do. And our daughter is in school now. And so
Yeah.
oftentimes I'll get up in the morning, I'll write for a couple hours, get my daughter ready to go to school. She'll go off to school. And then I've got, 5 or 6 hours to write or to, work on promotions and stuff. So I'm extraordinarily lucky, but I'm going to keep doing the writing. I'm going to keep doing the filmmaking as long as I can. As long as
Well,
someone's
I
interested,
tell
I'll
you,
keep doing
I
it.
you're so humble. I mean, your first novel has not even been released at the time of this recording, and you already have your second one written. That's
Um, well,
that's
like I said, there's a lot of waiting around. There's a
I
lot
mean,
of
that's
waiting
I mean,
around.
is the second one also in the pulp horror genre?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
There's a you probably haven't heard of it, but there's a legend of Devil's Lake. There's a in Devil's Lake in Baraboo,
Yeah.
Wisconsin. There's a legend about a sea monster. It's a very like threadbare legend. So I'm flushing it out a little bit. Yeah.
All right, Chris, this has been really great. Thank you so much for doing this. And once again, the book launch is at the Marcus Palace Cinema in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin on June 28th. The book Ticktown will be available on Amazon. Hopefully, we can get it in the local bookstore here in Oshkosh.
Yeah.
You never know.
Working on
So,
it. Yeah.
all right. Oh, yeah, working on it. All right, Chris, we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks again for doing this.
Tony, thanks so much. I appreciate the time.
All right.